Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone still has high energy. We just finished a very interesting panel discussion on digital marketing trends strategy for 2023. We're back and we're on our last session for today under the Powerful Brands track. And I hope everyone's learned a lot yesterday and from today's series of presentation. If this is your first time tuning in here at the Powerful Brands track, my name is Maria Monique. And I'm a B2B marketing specialist and host of the Rising Boss podcast, and I will be your session host for this afternoon. Now, we encourage your active participation today as our knowledge partner Manning will be offering 5 lucky attendees the chance to win the ebook titled Demand Forecasting Best Practices by Nicholas Van de Putte. Now, Manning will be awarding the most active attendees who rate sessions and leave comments, so please feel free to interact with us. Send questions over to the chat box, and I will be happy to share them over with our speaker. Now, speaking of our speaker for today's presentation, we have Dean, who is right there. Hello, Dean. He has been envisioning and creating human-centered digital products since the advent of the commercial web. He's founder and owner of the user experience strategy firm True Matter, leading the team to help national and international organizations change the way they do business online. He travels all over the world, really good, to speak and teach, mentoring professionals and challenging teams to a higher standard for digital experiences. Now, Dean's presentation, he will be telling us his story. It's going to be all about how green is my delusion, perception and reality in UX. Dean, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction, and it's an honor to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get started. All right. So I'm doing the share screen process. Bear with me. There we go. Screen shared, and we're off. Okay. So this talk is called How Green Was My Delusion? Perception and Reality in User Experience, or I might subtitle it Learning UX the Hard Way. Again, I am Experienced Dean on Twitter and Instagram. You've heard that I am the owner of a UX company called True Matter. That's all we do, all UX all the time. And I am from the American South. All right. So we say hello this way. Hey, y'all. That's what we say down here. And just for reference, South Carolina is where I'm from. And in the United States, you can see exactly where it is. It's morning here right now, and a beautiful day. Now let's get right on to it. Now, this is a story of failure, and it's a personal story. So we're going to have a little fun at my expense today. A relationship lesson that I once learned sheds remarkable light on why most sites, apps, software, digital products are difficult to use. I promise you're going to get something from this today. All right. We're going to learn how to make better products through a core lesson. And if you are a professional marketer in the digital space, you have to be marketing great products because it makes your job a lot easier to do. So let's go ahead and go back in time. We're going to go back in time to 1989, which for some of you may be before you were born. I was 19 at the time, and I was interested in this young lady, and her name was Angela Lawrence. This is a picture of us in 1989. Now, I was intensely focused on Ms. Lawrence. So I harnessed all the creativity I could to impress her. That means I sent her flowers. I wrote her long letters, which is what we did back in the day before email or anything, like on paper, letters that we mailed. I created mixtapes on cassette. That's how old I am. I drew her pictures. I flattered her. I talked to her on the phone. And of course, I bought gifts for her that I could not afford. I was very interested in Ms. Lawrence. Now, a word about Ms. Lawrence. This is very important for the story. She was a sweet, positive, happy person with a super sunshiny disposition. You see her here with flowers. This is exactly what her personality was like. She's a romantic at heart, and she loves stories with satisfying endings, very happy stories. These are the things that stirred her. And it's really important to keep this in mind for the rest of the story. One day, I bought Angela a gift because I was very interested in impressing her. And I thought, I am going to give her the best gift ever. Now, I'm a reader. I love to read books. And I thought it would be a good idea to gift Angie a book, but not just any book. I wanted to give her my favorite book of all time. And that book is called How Green Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn. Here you see an image of it. Now, I was super proud of this gift. Okay. I worked hard on this. This book meant a lot to me. This book was deeply moving to me, emotional, and just wonderful. It stirred my soul. Very important to me and my favorite. And I curated this gift, okay? And this is before the days of Amazon and Google, and you could find a book easily. I had to find a limited edition book. I wanted it to be absolutely perfect. And so in this case, I found a hardcover copy of this book, which only 300 copies were made. And I think this is a heroic gift. She'd be one of the few people to have Llewellyn's finest work. And I declared myself magnificently romantic. I'm the man. And I knew that sunshiny, happy Angela would just love it. Now, before we continue, I should tell you a little bit about the story, because that's also kind of important here. Llewellyn's novel takes place in the 1800s in Wales, in this idyllic, beautiful place in the British Isles. It's about this young boy. His name is Hugh Morgan, and it's how he grows to become a man. So far, so good. However, the book also happens to be about the horrors and dirt of coal mining. The novel follows Hugh as his family and his way of life in this beautiful green valley are slowly destroyed by ravenous coal mining, by industry. His wonderful valley just becomes a horrible black slag heap of coal debris. And it is truly awful. Our hero wants to be a part of what the family does, and that means coal mining. But of course, our hero makes some questionable decisions, has a bunch of moral failure in the book. He doesn't do that well. This novel is filled with anxiety, fear, and woe. It is full of injustice. Nothing goes well for anyone in this book. Nearly everyone dies, and nothing at all is resolved. Now, I gave that book to this person. And I also gave it to her on Valentine's Day, which in America is a special romantic day in which we celebrate each other and go out on dates and give flowers and chocolates and just have a wonderful, happy time. I gave her this book. I gave her the green book on the reddest day of the year. Very romantic. That's me. Now, Ms. Lawrence, of course, hated the book. She was unimpressed. She wasn't too keen on this overly depressing novels that ended badly. She wasn't looking for some bleak coming of age story about some boy in Wales. It was just not for her. So I essentially gave this horrible gift and I failed her, right? Ms. Lawrence preferred uplifting stories, full of characters with clear purpose, strong character, happy stories with great satisfactory endings. None of this happens in the book I gave her, by the way. What made perfect sense to me, wonderful book, was for her just absolutely awful. Now, I made a classic mistake, as you can probably understand. I gave her the gift that I wanted. I loved this book. Surely Angela would love it too. It moved me. It was important to me. Me, me, me. And I assumed she would see the genius in it, right? She would stand in awe of me as a gift giver and absolutely stay connected to me, right? She didn't like this book and it didn't really work out well. Now, she was very nice about it, of course. She said, I read this book and I really didn't like it. And here's why. And when she said this to me, I was like, what do you mean you didn't like it? How could you not like this book? Now, the question, of course, is how can a relatively smart person make such a stupid mistake? The problem was clearly with me, or to be more precise, with my brain. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And that's going to take us on a journey that's going to lead right to digital products. I promise. Hang in there with me. Because with this gift, I fell victim to something called the false consensus effect. Right? This is a cognitive bias that we all share. It's not just a relationship problem or bad gift giving on my part. It's real brain science, and it was put together with experimental evidence by this man named Dr. Lee Ross, 1977, out of Stanford. And he had lots of great evidence for this. I'm just going to give you one bit of evidence that proves that this effect exists inside all of us. So Ross asked a bunch of people to wear a sign, and it's sort of like a sign you put over your head. It's an advertising sign. It's a marketing sign about a restaurant. Let's call the restaurant Joe's Restaurant. So you'd have a big sign you'd wear, eat at Joe's, and you'd walk around outside and get people interested in the restaurant. Now, the experiment was not about advertising or about marketing. The experiment was about who would agree to wear the sign and what would they think about it. So some people agreed to wear the sign and some people didn't. 62% of the people who agreed to wear the Eat at Joe's sign, they felt that other people would also agree to do it. So if you wanted to wear the sign, you just instantly thought, yeah, everyone will do this, no problem. 67% of the people who did not want to wear the sign, they thought that no one else would want to wear it either. So a majority of each group, yes or no, felt their own preferences would be shared by everyone else. And Ross found this effect in a bunch of different experiments he did with people, and it always came out the same, which is really fascinating. So what do we learn from this? We learn that every person thinks at some level that they are the center of their universe. We all sort of think this. Right? False consensus leads us to believe that others share our opinions. They share our likes, they share our dislikes, and they share our way of seeing the world. Right, so let me put it this way. You are this black dot, okay? And you're in this world. And the world is full of these other dots. We'll just see all these yellow dots. You're living in this sea of yellow dots. But you don't see yourself this way, as separate from everyone else. You see yourself in the center of all the dots. You're the most important part of the world. You're in the middle. But you also tend to see all the other dots around you as black dots as well. You see the world as full of people who think the way you do. You see black dots wherever you go. Now, in America, we have several different states, and they tend to vote differently. This state is Texas, and we call it a red state, which means it's a more conservative state. So if you're from a place like Texas, there's a red state full of people who lean to the right, you probably assume that your neighbor is a right-wing person just like you. If you're in a different kind of state, like Oregon, which tends to lean leftward or liberal, if you live in Portland, Oregon, a blue state, full of people who lean to the left, you think your neighbor is a left-wing progressive just like you. You assume this. You assume people think the way you do. So this is basically a self-centered effect or a self-centered bias. It's an ego bias. All right, we all have it. This is not controversial. We basically all think this way. It's a perception, okay? We perceive consensus or agreement wherever we look, whether or not it actually exists. We just assume it. And we also interpret the world based on what we easily know. This is called the availability heuristic. Basically, we think about the world based on what we see right in front of us. Right? So we think from an egocentric way and we interpret the world with things that are right in front of us. Makes sense? Right? And that basically means we have an inward focus all the time. And it's very hard for us to combat that. Now, why am I telling you all this? This is the question. Why do I talk about this terrible gift that I gave Angela? Why do I tell you about the false consensus effect? Well, because it actually does affect us as professionals in the marketing sphere. Now, I actually define and make digital products for a living. All right. And if I make products or maybe I market these products, the main thing to understand is that I am the one making them. I am the one marketing them. Other people use them. Now, these folks who use the things we make or the things we market, they don't necessarily share our point of view. They don't share our experiences and they don't share our expertise, right? And the false consensus effect affects how we make things. It affects the things we make, right? We make things that make sense to us. So one of the reasons why a lot of software out there is really hard to use is because it's dominantly made by developers. There's not always a lot of people in the creative pursuits working on a ton of the software out there. Still today, it's made mostly by developers who make things for other developers. They make things that make sense to them or to other developers like them. Visual designers, we care most about visual things. We make things that people want to see and experience. We really make things so that other designers really will like it and maybe give us an award. Writers think about words first. We assume our words will be wonderful and understood and read in full, of course, because they're important, and we want other writers to be impressed. And it's sad but true. Even UX pros, people like me who are supposed to make things easy to use. This is my profession to think about other people. And I still make things that I think are easy to use. Right? That's a really big deal because I may be wrong. Stakeholders and executives, I think we all know who they're thinking about all the time. And of course, it's themselves. They care about their own perspectives. This is particularly problematic with executives who are thinking of very different things from the use of digital products or the marketing of digital products or how they're experienced. They're thinking of bottom line. They're thinking about markets. They're thinking about different things, and it can cause them to direct you to make bad decisions. Okay, you are just like everyone. Like me, you were the same. We have trouble getting outside of our own brain, right? So we have particular expertise and skills as marketers and product makers. Uh, and these skills, this experience can actually make the false consensus effect worse for us, right? Because we're not objective, right? Biases aren't something that other people have. Brain power and experience do make things worse. Now, when we're young, when we're new in our profession, at least we know that we have ignorance. We don't know everything. And we're aware of this. So we ask questions and we try to figure things out and we have to be taught things. And it helps us to see the perspective of others. But as we grow in experience and knowledge, wonderful things happen because we get very good at things and we understand an industry and we can see problems easily. But we also start to think that we know the answers before we truly carefully study people or the questions in general. So that means our work is affected. So let's talk about how. A couple of quick examples. One is the hamburger menu. You remember this is a mobile menu icon. If you sort of click it on a mobile screen, you see, I see the menu, I see the navigation, and it hides all that navigation and it gives us lots of space to make wonderful things and pictures and great stuff on mobile. Now, it was created by product creators to save space. And as soon as we started doing that, we saw a couple of problems. One was that engagement started dropping like a rock. with people who were interacting with our sites because navigation options, core tasks were hidden. And that's a problem for engagement. That's a problem for conversion, all of that sort of thing. And we're like, oh no. And also, not only were the options hidden, but the options, people didn't understand how to find the options. People didn't understand at first what this navigation item meant. Now, they understand it today, mostly, but it took a very long time for this to happen. So we thought this was a great idea as digital product makers. It saves space. People will understand. Not true. People didn't understand. It took a long time. Engagement dropped. Ultimately, it was an interesting and good idea, but for a very long time, a tough track record. Now, no one is immune, by the way, okay, to getting things wrong. And we think of places like Google or Airbnb, Apple, they always get things right because they're always about usability. Definitely not true. They have problems thinking internally as well, all the time. Now, back in the day, now we stream music all the time, but back in the day, we might have bought it. We downloaded it and we paid for it. And we might have had a whole family that was linked together. And if I bought music, I'd want maybe my son to be able to download that music too, because he's in family sharing. But family sharing was a very difficult concept, and lots of people got it wrong. And Apple had a very hard time communicating it to real people. What made sense to Apple didn't make sense necessarily to everyone else. So when you're trying to do things with family sharing, you encountered all sorts of problems. And here are a series of error messages that you might receive, none of which make great sense. You might ask to buy something, but you can't enable ask to buy, whatever that means, by the way. Maybe it's an account problem. Who knows? Maybe this makes sense to someone outside of Apple. Not really. Re-download is unavailable, right? That means I can't, it was bought by someone else or it's canceled. I don't even know what this means. What is a re-download? Why can't I get this song that's been purchased? There are billing problems with someone else who bought the song, and the answer Apple gives you is go ask them about it, right? Not very helpful. If you violated terms of your agreement, you can't join a family. And notice what this particular error message says, that you have to wait 242 days before you can try again. What does that mean? I don't know. Why do you have to wait? Who can say? Apple understands, but you don't. They're not thinking of you. They're not thinking of me very well. Maybe you can't join this family. Now Apple is breaking up families. At least that's what it sounds like. I can't really tell. You need to leave your current family, join another family, whatever. I get this error, remove Dean from the family. What did I do? Removing from the family seems a little much. I don't know what the and more here means. What do I lose? Who can say? Basically, I've yet to meet someone who mastered that, who understood iTunes family sharing. And now we do streaming. It is definitely a little bit easier, but that was a big deal. And not even Apple could communicate well what they were thinking and what they were building to people outside of themselves. They were very deep into their own ecosystem. Now, one thing that we do when we make digital products, we make them as well. And when we aren't thinking about others properly, we make things by taking shortcuts, because shortcuts are faster and cheaper, and they avoid arguments or controversy, right? So we try certain things, like we avoid real users because that takes time to talk to them, and they might say something we don't like, and no one has budget. We might use out-of-the-box solutions and not change them at all because it's faster, it's cheaper, it's quicker. Developers do this all the time, and they just assume everyone can use it. We assume people are tech savvy, like they know anything at all about technology and can navigate everything we do. We take orders and give in to vocal or opinionated stakeholders because doing anything else takes too long, is a real pain. And again, easier, quicker, faster just to do what someone says, even if it's a bad idea. We look to process to solve everything. Development teams do this all the time. They think they're trying to make something better, so they think maybe our development process should be better, and that will solve all of our problems. No, they'll just make an unusable product a little more efficiently. We believe training will save the day. Don't worry, let's just get this done. We'll train people how to use it. And of course, that means we give bad gifts. The shortcut I made was I like the book. Let's get it. I wasn't thinking about someone else, just me, quick, fast, go. Inward focus basically destroys user experience, right? The easy to use digital product you hope people would love. Inward focus turns it into that coal mining slag heap. Now, we can combat our brain. And what I want to do is give you some thoughts about how you can get outside yourself a little bit and make these digital products better. There's a bunch we can do. First, recognize that you're not normal. Okay, you are not normal. You are no longer a normal, average, everyday user. You're more like a superhero. Right? You're more like the Hulk. Like the Hulk can lift 300 billion tons of rock. Very awesome, super strong. But the Hulk is not very good at little things. The Hulk is terrible at little needlepoint, right? You are great at making things. You are great at marketing things. You are very bad at being a user. You've probably forgotten what it's like to truly be one. This is a command or function F, which people use to find anything on a screen or a web page or whatever. But no one understands how to do this. Basically, people who make products, they know a lot about this. Advanced users know a lot. Most people couldn't even tell you what this is. And most people are the people using your stuff. Your value comes from knowing what you don't know. So I want you to embrace not knowing. Embrace ignorance. And I mean ignorance in a really good way here, not in a negative way. Richard Saul Wurman, he's the father of information architecture. He said this great thing. The key to making things understandable or knowable is to understand what it means to not understand. Put yourself in the position of someone who doesn't understand what you do. Not knowing is exciting. Not knowing is motivating. And we need to reclaim this instinct. He says, and I agree completely, my expertise has always been in my ignorance, my not knowing, my admission, my acceptance of not knowing. It's a beautiful thing. Once you do that, you're ready to go. You're ready to learn and get things right. Now, you should ask yourself, am I wrong? Is this book a good idea, Dean? Should have asked that, shouldn't I have? Should I make a digital product this way for people who can barely log into anything? Should I make it super complex? Probably not. All right. You have to ask yourself if you're wrong, and you have to think about things that are obvious. Now, everything in retrospect, when we think about the past, we look at problems and we think, boy, that thing I did, that was so obviously wrong. That book I gave, that was so obviously a bad idea. I didn't see it at the time. So the idea is to get outside of yourself now. Like, this is me when I was in high school. I mean, look at this haircut, this mullet, look at that mustache I've got going. I thought this was a great idea at the time. You couldn't have told me otherwise. Now I look back and I think, I don't know, not a great idea, Dean. We also need to basically change the way we go about thinking, which we can do, which is exciting. We need to avoid the internal perspective. And this is something that you get, especially from stakeholders and executives. We think that the product is a thing that we have to push out to people, that we have to market to people, that we have to tell them about so they'll use. And we have to talk about all the great features and all the great things. And basically just get them to understand it and go. But what we really need to do is the opposite. We need to think about the people who are using and acting and doing, and let that inform and drive the product. That's the difference. And that's how you think outside of yourself. We also need to correct our course. And we can do this too, which is very exciting. All these things we can do. And they're not even that hard, which is the encouraging and fun thing about it. So instead of avoiding real users, we can spend time with real users. Easy. Spend time with people, observe what they do, and you'll understand how to make things for them. Instead of using out-of-the-box methods, maybe we can try something new. Maybe we can customize that out-of-the-box solution. We should test it to see if it works too. Instead of assuming people are computer scientists and tech geniuses, we should assume that people using our stuff are new to everything, are new to technology, are new to our product, and it'll change the way we make things. Also, will change the way we market to them. Instead of taking old orders from vocal stakeholders, we should offer research-driven advice. This means behavioral studies with analytics and tracking behavior. You can learn a ton about how people use digital products, and you could offer this evidence. You could do user testing and give evidence. If you are in an argument with someone, particularly a stakeholder or an executive, and you have good evidence, you have a good shot, right? Research-driven advice can solve that. Instead of looking for a process to solve everything, and I'm talking to you, people who develop products, instead focus on making something high quality. High quality user experience is more important than the particular process you use to get there. You can't believe training will save the day, because it won't. Plenty of evidence on that front. Why not make it easy to use in the first place? Because no one really is going to go take your training or remember your training or go consume all that help content you'll waste time on. And of course, instead of giving terrible, tone-deaf gifts, you can give gifts that people actually want. This is the essence of service that I want to leave you with. When you want to serve someone, when you want to do something right for them, you consider them. You spend time with them. You walk with them. You walk a mile in their shoes. And when you do this, the answers to the questions you're asking become completely obvious and easy, right? Real people get tripped up by your complex login process. Most users think your app does way too much. Most people have no desire to read 95% of what you write. That's not Angela's kind of book. See? Easy. Now, what have we learned? This ill-advised gift has taught us some things. I am not Angela. Big lesson for me, right? It seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me at the time, not when I was shopping for a gift. Right? And you are not the user. Whenever you think about the gulf or the gap between your perspective and that of your users, I want you to think of Dean and Angela and this gift. Right? You are not immune to the false consensus effect. It can ruin your project before you even start, no matter how good you are. And thank you very much for listening. I would say I should add one more thing that I learned out of this is that sometimes it pays to be lucky. All right. And I am a lucky guy, because even though I gave this terrible, horrible, bad gift to Angela, she did understand. She did forgive me, thank goodness. And now I've been married to her for 32 years. So it did actually work out. Maybe that goes a little bit against my advice. I did something bad and it still worked, but I wouldn't suggest it. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. My name is Dean. You can find me in all these places. I'm easy to find online if you want to talk to me or connect with me. I really appreciate you listening. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing right now. There we go. And I'm back. And I'm happy to take questions or chat with you a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Jean. That was a really interesting presentation that you should. I learned so many things from that, because I think, because as a marketer, I always think to myself, I think the best way, this is quote, I think the best way to reach out to my customers, or the way that I should think about what they would like, is how I would like to receive messages or to receive advertisements.
I still do that.
It's like
I do it
it's
today.
like, okay. Yeah, it's like, okay, how do I want my ads to be received? Maybe this is the same way others would want to receive that as well. And you're right when you point out that you are not your user. Sometimes I would have a preference, and my customers or my users would have a different preference. So that's really, and just a good reminder for us marketers out there. But I wanted to ask you something. So what practical ways then can marketers or brands or organizations find in terms of really knowing what your customers want? What are the practical ways for us to figure out what our customers actually really want?
Well, there's of course a lot of ways to do this, and it depends on what you're out to do. So, if you are, let's say, you're just trying to understand the way people respond to a thing. Let's take advertising as a great example. Um, you can do things like focus groups. Everyone knows how to do these things. These are a great idea, and you could understand how people may react to a thing, because that's a visceral reaction. That is a gut reaction. I don't like that. Movies do this all the time. They will test run movies with different endings and see how audiences react. And if they react really badly, they'll change a movie at the last minute to make sure it's received better. And for me, that's just a culture of thinking about others. And it depends on what you're doing uh, uh, for you to decide what tactic to take. Now, in my world, where we make digital products all the time, we are actually less concerned about opinion and more concerned about behavior. Because if I'm trying to make something that's easy to use, and I would say that means easier to market, I want to make something that conforms to how people act. People are actually very, very bad at telling you how they will use things. They're good at telling you whether they like the movie ending or whether an advertisement makes them feel good or not. But they're bad at telling you what they would use and if they would use it. You can show them a screen and say, "Would you use this?" And people say, "Sure." And then when they actually use it, that doesn't happen at all. Would you find this easy? Yes. No, they don't. When you actually test them, it's problematic. So this is how we know, for instance, that most people have real problems logging in to all these wonderful things we make. Log in, sign up, password retrieval, two-factor authentication. This is really hard for most people. And so our barriers to entry are a problem. And so that's why digital product teams are working so very hard on this problem, because they see the behavior. For us, what we do when we want to understand how people work and how to make things for them, we literally go to where they're working. We sit down next to them, sometimes all day long, and we watch them work. And we watch them use software, or we watch them use their intranet, and we carefully observe their behavior. You may ask questions later, but we want to know how they act. And that's important for building. Now, there are other ways, of course, to get insights from customers. And a lot of that I mentioned earlier is in the amazing array of analytical data we can get today. It is not just from advanced use of Google Analytics. You can use wonderful tools, which you should be using, like Crazy Egg or Hotjar or whatever, that these are click tracking and behavior tracking tools where you can find out where people are coming from, what they're clicking, who they are, how far they scroll. You could anonymously watch videos of people going through things. You could track rage clicks. You could learn so much about how people use things. And as soon as you know a little bit, you make some easy fixes. Amazing how easy some of the fixes can be, and make it better. So you have user testing studies. You should always be testing with people. You can do, you could test different types of things in an interface, right? Just like you can test different ads, just different
Yes.
way to go about it. The point of all this, and you can research all this online, is that if you have a culture of thinking outside yourself, you have a culture of trying to understand others and trying to understand their proclivities, their ideas, their positions, their behavior, you have a better shot at marketing to them better. You have a better shot at making something that they love. The very best things out there, and I'll try to think of a good one. All right, let's take booking vacations. Let's take Airbnb, which is a site that's wonderfully easy to use and very targeted and well done. They do a ton of user testing to get to where they are. These are not guesses that they're making. and hoping that they're right. They are constantly getting feedback from users. That's why it's so wonderful and easy to use. It's also why their marketing is extremely good. They absolutely understand who they're trying to reach, and it's because they spend so much time doing it. That's a very long answer.
Yeah, but that's really helpful because it's important that we're customer centric. We try to get to know our customer, their persona, and not just simply rely on our intuition. So that's really good
Mhm.
advice. I have one question from the audience. I think this one's really interesting. What if your audience is people who believe themselves to be really smart? How do you find the balance between making it easy but also not damaging their ego, like for example clients from defense industry?
Yeah, or yeah, defense industry, or you could say software for physicians, or whatever. People who have an elevated view of themselves. Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, the beautiful thing about the tactics we've described is that they work for absolutely everybody. They work for people. They work for my mom. All right, who's nearing 80, who has a hard time grasping technology, and they work for that. Super arrogant, super smart person in the defense industry. They work for doctors and lawyers and people who think a lot of themselves.
Mhm.
So if you test with these people, you will understand what to do to serve them. And in some cases, what you'll learn is all that fancy stuff you wanted to do to try to reach them is not of any use to you. You need to be faster, more efficient, quicker, use different language for them. You will see this just by observing them, and you'll be able to do it. So yeah, you have to tailor things to the right people. People who use complex software, they don't care about any of the fancy stuff we care about. They care about efficiency, productivity, speed. I want to do everything with the keyboard. Don't slow me down. Don't make things big and wonderful and lovely like Airbnb. Make things tight and compact. It just depends on the user. So
Yeah.
I would treat this like a scientist. All right. They are your subject. They are not a person who you find distasteful. They are just an interesting problem to solve, and you could always solve it.
Exactly. So yeah, again, the approach is still, really making sure that it's tailored and what does the user
Oh,
actually
yeah.
really need. Another question from our audience, Lucy. She said, "I wanted to thank you, Dean, for the story that you shared.
Thank you.
My question is, what is the best way to get a trustworthy response from your users?"
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, well, I think what you mean is how do you establish mutual trust with people who use the things you make? Now,
Mhm.
um, this is a different question if you're trying to establish trust in a marketing context. In a marketing context, the best way to establish trust, in my view, excuse me, in my view, is to be truthful about the thing um, you are forwarding, that you are marketing. Uh, when you make claims that are untrue or elevated, people tend to not trust, particularly after they try it and are tricked, right, through dark patterns or whatever. The way you establish trust, mutual trust in a product, is to think ahead of your user, and
Mhm.
answer their questions and provide for them great interactions before they even think to ask about them. And you do that by doing all the things I've already mentioned. If you are observing them, if you're testing, you'll know what these things are. So, for instance, if I'm using a banking app and I am depositing a check online, taking a picture of it and depositing it, many people learned right away that the chances of me doing more than one are very good. So they established trust in use by giving me a button that I almost certainly want before I ask for it. I deposit a check and it says, "Do you want to deposit another one?" which means really fast. I don't have to go back out and back in and then deposit. I just click and go. Because chances are I'm doing more than one deposit at once. It happens all the time. They figured that out. They said, let's just put a button there. And this establishes some level of trust and joy in using something. So you got to get in front of your user. You do that by understanding them and doing all the things we talked about. That really establishes trust in use, if that makes sense. So in marketing, in my opinion, it's about being candid and honest with what the thing is that you're marketing and what it isn't. Otherwise, use is different.
Yes.
I hope that helps. It's a complex question.
It is. But thank you so much, Dean. I think we learned a lot so much from your presentation. We don't have time anymore, but once again, we enjoyed it. And thank you so much for anyone that's tuning in. Please make sure to follow Dean on all the social media platforms he's in, or simply Google him if you want to reach out.
Yeah,
or if you have any other questions. Yes. Thank you so much, Dean. And thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you.
This is all we got. Remember the revolution in our minds. This is all we got.
Lock me out of this life institution. I am angry and high on illusions. Yes, I hate, but it's not a solution. Try my best, but I'm just a human. Oh, we don't need to say